Welcome to Tea Time, my friends, a place where I muse about my gender transition experience and in the process aim to comfort and inspire others to a greater level of self-awareness. I am Artemis. On this episode, we are enjoying a Bavarian carrot cake from the Rose and Vine Gift Company, tea, and we are going to be tackling a wicked subject today, which is something that's been circling the government and interwebs now for a little while. But more recently, here in the United States, Dr. Rachel Levine came out in support of, oh my God, came out in support of hormone blockers and transitional surgeries for young transgender people, specifically people under the age of 16. And I've been meaning to make this video for a little while, but I felt that with this new politically progressive situation unraveling very quickly in front of my eyes, that now was definitely the time to make this video. So here we go. You'll see me referencing my laptop a lot because there is just a stunning amount of information that I'm not going to try to delineate to you in this video. I'm going to link a couple of articles in the description box so that you can go through and read some of these things yourself. Admittedly, it took me a long time to do, and this video is just going to kind of distill some of the major points for you. So all of that aside, we are going to be addressing some of these things that Rachel Levine is advocating, as well as just talking about hormone blockers, or I should say, really just talking about medical interventions for transgender individuals who are below adult age, so below 18, in a lot of cases below 16 and younger. So we're just going to dive right into this. Rachel Levine advocates for the ability of children under the age of 16 to choose hormone blockers. Now, as a history for her, of the state of Pennsylvania, she was the Secretary of the Department of Health. And even at that point, she was giving lectures supporting sexual reassignment surgeries on children. And I know that while it seems many people in the trans community right now are celebrating her progressiveness on this issue, I am personally horrified. And I'm going to lay out in this video exactly why. And I'm hoping that you're curious enough to listen on. So before I go any further, I will say this. There are some transgender kids who from a very, very young age know exactly who they are, and they carry that on consistently through adulthood. I find that to be a vast minority of the kids, and the vast majority of transgender individuals really don't come fully around to understanding exactly who they are until a much later age, and I'm definitely in that category, so I'm going to try not to be terribly biased in speaking from that angle, but I do know that not all transgenders experience their transition or experience their expression of transgender the same. I do know that the vast majority of transgender children have to go through their adolescence and through puberty to really get a full understanding of themselves, at the very least to develop themselves mentally. So therefore, on that basis alone, arresting puberty with medical intervention could actually prevent this individual from making sound decisions about what to do with their body. Children lack the mental development to be able to make these kinds of irreversible choices, and later in this video I'm going to outline what I believe is the most balanced way to do this based on the information that we do have. The most balanced way to transition, if that's something that you wish. So Levine believes that gender is more of what you feel. At least that's what she said. We already know, though, that the parts of the brain regulating emotion are pretty much unhinged for a while until puberty is over. I mean, you can remember as a teenager, everything was the end of the world and the issues were absolutely huge. Most of us, hopefully, leveled ourselves out and got a grip on ourselves after puberty was over. And I'm sure that we all could have used a little more mental health support during those years, and it would have gone a long way to preventing the loss of life among all of us. More on that a little bit later too. So let's switch gears a minute. There are competing theories out there as to what determines your gender identity, whether it be neurobiological, physiological, developmental. Ironically, Levine believes your gender is determined by your neurobiology, which in part develops only after you've gone through puberty. The truth is, we just don't know enough yet about what factors contribute to gender identity. It's incredibly complex and entirely possible that from person to person, it's very, very different. So let's just take me for an example. I never experienced a very serious body dysphoria, even during puberty. I will say that I didn't like it. I don't know too many teenagers that do, honestly. I tried to make myself fit in as a feminine person, and eventually realized that that just wasn't for me, and maybe figured I was just a tomboy. I didn't even know that transgenders existed, really. I kind of grew up in a bubble. I didn't even know what I was missing, but even throughout that entire process, I never once considered taking my own life. I came out really late in my life as a lesbian in 2016. And when I learned a little bit more about the LGBT community, that's when I discovered that, hey, transgender actually describes me a little bit better. Actually, a lot a bit better. And so after a ton of therapy and a ton of research and a lot of time, I eventually chose taking testosterone injections and getting top surgery to just feel a little bit better about myself. All of this to say that transitioning can look very different from person to person, and assuming that hormone blockers or surgeries is going to help every transgender child is a really, really dangerous assumption, especially if you're just going on the fact that that child thinks or feels that they're transgender. So we have one study that was done, the DeVry study, that talks positively about adolescents receiving early medical intervention for their transgender issues, and also one study that shows a decrease in the likelihood of transgenders considering taking their own lives if they had received early treatment. These studies don't include the possibility of compounding mental health issues, which do seem to be fairly rife in the transgender community, or even really in the LGBT community, or whether or not these individuals had received the proper mental health counseling and support. And one study of each is not enough for any field of science to adopt that as fact. Remember that science is done by giving a hypothesis and then trying as many ways that you possibly can to prove it wrong before you finally accept that maybe it's well-founded and maybe it's right. So let's switch gears again here and consider a moment all of the potential downsides of early administration of hormone blockers. Let's just use that, let alone surgeries. So these things that I'm about to talk about can be found in that lengthy article on Gender HQ, which is a trans advocate group. Effects of hormone blockers are not irreversible, as some sources have stated. Not allowing the genitalia in the nether regions to develop with puberty can reduce or eliminate that individual's ability to experience orgasm, for starters. I don't think that's something that many of us want. You can also be rendered sterile if you get hormone blockers as an adolescent. And think about all the trans men who still use their ability to bear children. That may not have been possible if they had gotten hormone blockers at a young age. If you're a male to female, not being fully developed makes a bottom surgery transition even more complicated than it already is. And now, what about all the people who detransition? Where are all the studies that show what causes that phenomena? And how are we to be sure that we couldn't contribute to that we would not contribute to that issue if we allowed an immature individual like a child to make a gender transition decision? And all of that stuff that I mentioned above, you want a child to have to consider. When at, let's just say, 10, 11, 12 years old, you're more interested in just figuring out when the football game's going to be so that you can go hang out with your friends, much less what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years from then. Look, we're on the frontier of gender studies right now. There's so much that we don't know. As a transgender, I know that I'm a minority, and medical intervention and understanding of my minority issues may take a while to come to full fruition. And I think Levine is projecting what she wished would have been available in her childhood. and assuming that hormone blockers, she's assuming that hormone blockers and surgeries will fix the issue. And I think that's a step too far in the radical direction. Whatever I choose to do after I've fully developed mentally, I accept the consequences of. Whatever happened before I was able to do so, I fully accept the consequences of as well. We do our best and accept full responsibility. The process is far from perfect, it's complex, and it's hard. It's not going to be all roses and rainbows. Here's what I think is the best way to handle this situation. A child who shows signs of or says that they are transgender should undergo a process of evaluation by a qualified therapist. Also, something that is a little difficult to get right now, but we're getting there. They can use social transitioning methods and try out different pronouns, different names, clothes, activities, etc. Lots of different social avenues for testing out whether or not they may be transgender. And hopefully not just confusing it with sexuality. They should be evaluated for their mental health state regularly, especially during puberty, which they need to experience for the biological developmental health. More regular sessions of mental therapy may be needed to help them understand what is happening and so they can cope, and this is key. They have to understand what their body is going through, and it will make it easier to deal with. If I had had these kinds of educational resources, I guarantee my life would have been far less bumbling in the dark. Education, I believe, is the cure for everything. It's up here. And once that person has come through puberty and has had all the supportive counseling, they're free to pursue whichever avenues they wish for transition after they reach that point of developmental maturity up here. Will there be male to female transgender individuals who suffer some changes during puberty that make it very difficult to pass as women? Yeah, and that really sucks. Do I wish I were hella taller and had more robust bone structure? Definitely. I think I have Yeti envy, for sure. But I believe that allowing children to make these decisions, the negatively impacted, possibly non-transgender individuals undergoing these treatments by mistake will far outweigh the transgender individuals who are happy that they got early physical intervention. So, I know this is a super hot topic, but I do welcome comments, questions, stories, anecdotes, really anything on this topic, because again, we're at the frontier here. There's a lot that we don't know. So there could be tons of conjecture. We have a little bit of information to extrapolate a lot of what to do. So at this point, I'm interested in solutions. And on this channel, you probably already know well by now, if you've listened to any one of my videos, that I do not believe in taking extreme measures for the benefit of a few, especially when it comes at the expense of adopting personal responsibility and just accepting some things as the way that they are. Hey, it is what it is. So, until next time.